Well, hello! What's this video all about? Well, check this out.
Nathaniel is in a committed relationship with a car that he's named Chase. He met Chase in a resale lot about 5 years ago.
Love you, baby. That's the one where the guy just, he has sex with his car, basically.
Does that feel good? You're a handsome man.
Believe it or not, what you just watched ties in very strongly with what we're about to cover in this video. We are going to be unpacking a behavioral science principle that will be incredibly powerful if you want to better lead, influence, sell, people stuff. Chapter 1, the science. Here's a question for you. Which of these principles is not an officially recognized behavioral science principle? See if you can be one of those rare people to get this correct. And you can only pick one. The clock is ticking. If you're like most people we've quizzed, you have no idea, but you're leaning towards the IKEA effect because it doesn't sound very behaviorally sciencey. But of course, you're not like most people. You're very well read, very astute, and you recognized immediately that the IKEA effect is in fact a very well recognized principle in behavioral science, and the odd one out was the effort gradient effect, which is one we just made up. The IKEA effect is very powerful. That's why it's one of about 50 behavioral science principles that we include in our behavioral engineering toolkit that we use with clients. Wow, what a subtle plug. So what is it? Well, if you've seen any of our other videos, you know that we often like to use metaphors to make a concept more concrete, like the get a big dog strategy, or the pulsing principle, or the fall first strategy. I'll link to those videos in the description. They're great. Fortuitously, this concept already has the metaphor baked in. Thanks, behavioral scientists. Specifically thanks to these behavioral scientists who identified and named the principle, published in 3 studies in 2011. I'll let famed behavioral economist Dan Ariely explain it himself.
One of the things about IKEA furniture is that the instructions are just not that good. When I assembled my first piece, I assembled lots of things in the wrong way. It took me a very long time. It was rather frustrating. But what I realized afterward, that I had special fondness for the piece of furniture that I created with so much effort, and so much that I kept on carrying with me as I was moving around the country from place to place. It wasn't the quality of the furniture, it was that we had an evening together, we had a relationship. And we did all kinds of experiments on this, and we found out that when we invest some of ourselves into something, we start liking that thing even more.
Thanks for that, Dan. I was a little bit distracted though by the guy who was using his phone as a hammer. I mean, look at that. That's nuts. Look at his colleague. She's like, what the Richard? What are you doing?
What the Richard?
On a side note, I actually live near an IKEA. This past weekend, I assembled a bookshelf. It took all fjälking day. Or as the Swedes pronounce it,
Fjälkingen.
There you go. I feel like I should stop making IKEA jokes. What about a fun fact instead? IKEA is so popular that apparently 1 in every 10 Europeans was conceived on an IKEA bed, which is mad when you consider how little privacy there is in those stores.
Hello.
Chapter 2, Applications of the IKEA Effect. So how can you apply this principle at work to get better results with and through other people? In other words, how can I make you feel that this video wasn't just an excuse for me to make IKEA jokes that I had previously Googled? Here are some ideas. Coaching conversations, whereby you don't give advice, but instead ask questions to facilitate the other person coming up with a solution themselves. Goal setting, inviting your team members to play an active role in setting their own goals and their own targets so they're more likely to take ownership for them. Something known as job crafting. To what extent can you get team members to play a role in defining their own job description? And here are some examples that apply to groups and teams. Strategy. How do you get your immediate team or members of the broader organization to contribute to crafting strategy? Operational plans. Sometimes strategy is already decided. So how can you get your team to co-create an operational plan based on that strategy? Team alignment. How do you get your team or members of the broader organization to play a role in defining values, behaviors, or ways of working, or at the very least, formulating how they will personally live them? Idea generation and problem solving. If you come up with all the ideas, others will have less buy-in. Training. This is central to all of the training and facilitation we do with corporate clients. Don't just tell people information. They won't value it. Create experiences where they discover it for themselves. And here's one that applies to selling and persuasion, proposing an idea. Don't just pitch your idea, your solution, service, product. Instead, can you co-create your solution with your customer or your client or your stakeholder so they feel more invested and want to take more ownership for it? These are some ways you can apply the IKEA effect in your work. Maybe you can add to this list. I would love to hear others. One last thing. I know Swedish chefs cook all sorts of things, but when I think of IKEA and food, I think of Swedish meatballs. And the reason I mention this is I'm not sure if you've ever seen the documentary on how IKEA makes their meatballs.
Sheep balls.
That's right.
Tell them why yours are so tasty.
Well, the trick is you've got to clip them off way up high.
All right, that's enough IKEA jokes, but you should be grateful that I'm making IKEA jokes because normally you would have to make them yourself. Okay, I'll let myself out.